I rise to speak in support of the Criminal Law Amendment, Home Burglary and Other Offences Bill. And for those people who might not be in the chamber who will read this later or watching this I just want to quickly outline from the explanatory memorandum very broadly what this bill seeks to achieve. What we are attempting to achieve with this bill is to provide mandatory minimum sentences for specific serious offences of physical or sexual violence committed in the course of an aggravated home burglary. These minimum sentences would only apply to adult offenders, 18 years or older, and juvenile offenders between the ages of 16 and 18. To revise the repeat offenders counting rules for some home burglary offences, increase the mandatory minimum sentence for adult repeat home burglary offenders, and provide a clear distinction between aggravated home burglaries and aggravated burglaries of places other than dwellings. The bill will also amend the Sentencing Act of 1995 to provide a minimum non-parole period of 15 years for adult offenders who commit murder in the course of an aggravated home burglary. Now, I'm probably going to focus predominantly on the mandatory sentencing side as opposed to the 3-count adjustment as well. But it's fair to say that this bill has got very broad community support. And in fact, that is agreed upon by all in this House. We've heard from a number of members opposite who've agreed that there's an appetite in the public, amongst the community, to see tougher sentencing. And I think that fact in itself is important, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Some of the repeated accusations that we've heard from those opposite and in the public arena is that somehow this legislation shows some great disrespect to our judiciary, that somehow by introducing this legislation we're disrespecting our judiciary. Now we know that the judiciary is a critical part of our 3 arms of government. We know that. They are respected. I respect them. The members on this side of the House respect the judiciary. They are honoured, and rightly so. They are highly educated and highly knowledgeable. But, members, they are not elected. Our judiciary are not elected members of Parliament. They have not been elected to represent the people of Western Australia. It is the role of Parliament, it's our principal role, to create legislation. Legislation which is then acted upon by the judiciary. And we're doing just that. A common argument against mandatory sentencing, and we've heard that yesterday and today again, is that it limits the judiciary's discretion. Mandatory sentencing limits the judiciary's discretion. And of course, in a way, it does. But no different to how our current setting of maximum sentences limits the judiciary as well. Do we not already tell the judiciary the limit of sentencing that they may apply in a particular case? What if a judge wanted to hand out a sentence for 30 years for a crime where the maximum sentence is 20 years? Are we not limiting that judge? Are we not limiting the judiciary? Are the members opposite arguing that we should abolish any and all specific guidelines for sentencing? Should we place our trust so wholly into the judiciary that we should not be providing them any guidance at all? And if they want to hand out life for robbery, well, if that particular judge wants to do that, so be it. It's rubbish. We don't do that. What we're doing here is refining the range within which we would like to see the judiciary operate. For a number of the crimes addressed by this bill, the current maximum sentence is 20 years. But currently there's no minimum. In theory, and it is a theoretical argument, but in theory the judiciary can hand out a sentence anywhere between 0 years and 20. What we're doing, having listened to our constituency and acting as their representatives in our principal role as legislators, is indicating that as a society we would like the judiciary to hand out sentences between 15 and 20 years. The judiciary can still practice discretion. As far as I'm concerned, they can hand out a sentence for 16 years, or 17, or 18 and a half. That's discretion. We're just giving them a refined range within which to work in. As a party, we proudly stand by the decision to introduce this legislation.
Sorry to interrupt. Members, I'm already struggling to hear the member on his feet. If we could take the conversations outside, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Member for Virginia.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. Did you know I needed a drink, did you?
Here to help.
As a party, we are proudly standing by the decision to introduce this legislation. We advised the voting public of our intentions. We were very upfront and honest. We took this to an election. We told them this is, as a Liberal Party that is tough on crime, this is what we intend to do.
Member for Warnbro.
If the community had have rejected that notion, if they thought that by limiting the judiciary's range within which we're asking them to operate for these heinous crimes, then they would have voted differently. But they voted for us. And so we're doing the right thing and bringing that legislation to this House. Now, the real point of interest here is to see how the Labor Party have dealt with this piece of legislation. They've been squirming. Now, we know that many people in the Labor Party, including many members opposite,
Member for Warnbro, I call you for the second time. The member for Joondalup has the call. He's not seeking interjections. We've already indicated it's difficult to hear the member from that part of the chamber. For the purposes of the Hansard, I'd appreciate if there were no further interjections. Member for Joondalup.
Mr Acting Speaker, we know that many people in the Labor Party, and including many members opposite, are strongly opposed to mandatory sentencing. We find examples of that readily in the media, and we certainly find plenty of evidence of that peppered throughout Hansard. In fact, we heard it again just a moment ago. They come up with every reason known to man, well, this is terrible, it won't work, and the prisons will be too full, and it's going to cause this issue, and it's going to cause that issue. The opposition's lead speaker, no less, the Shadow Attorney General, was quoted in the media when he attended the Australian Law Students Association. Mandatory sentencing is bull... Mandatory sentencing is bull... I'm pretty sure that everyone listening is smart enough to understand what that is.
Member for Girraween, I call you to order for the first time. Again, the member for Joondalup has the call. I'd like to hear from the member for Joondalup.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. And that is from...
Point of order. Member for Girraween.
Perhaps he can table that.
That's at the member's discretion, and he's a backbench, so he can't table it, but it's up to his discretion whether he lays it on the table for the rest of today's proceedings.
Thank you, Mr Acting Speaker. I'm pretty sure if the member for Girraween is so interested that you can Google it. Check out it's a Facebook page. It is...
Member for Joondalup, thank you. Member for Girraween, I'm on my feet. Sit down. I'm on my feet. And I'm still on my feet. I call you to order for the second time. You continue to interject. I'll call you for a third time. Call you to order for the second time. Member for Joondalup.
Mr Acting Speaker, Hansard is peppered with the opposition's statements against mandatory sentencing. Even today, admittedly throughout a different discussion, but we heard from the Leader of the Opposition remind all the members in this House that as members of Parliament, we're not expected to agree on everything. We can disagree. And you know what? He's right. I very rarely agree with the Leader of the Opposition, but it is okay to come into this place, given that we all represent diverse electorates, and between the 59 members in this House and 36 members in the other place, we represent the good people of Western Australia. It's okay to come in here and have different points of view. So I don't have an issue with the members opposite disagreeing with mandatory sentencing. That is their right to do so. And in fact, if the majority of the opposition's constituency were telling them that we think that mandatory sentencing is a terrible thing, I'd actually go as far to say that it's incumbent on them to represent those views in this House. They should vote against this bill. Any rational person that rereads Hansard and rereads all the speeches given, including by the lead speaker, on everything that's wrong with mandatory sentencing, they would fully, completely understand and even support the opposition if they crossed the floor and voted against it. You guys should be absolutely proud to have your names recorded on the nose when the bill comes to a vote. But you know what? This is where the Labor Party gives up on any pretense of integrity, any pretense. Conveniently declaring that this bill is actually not the true will of the people, but it's rather political posturing. And even though we don't agree with it, and even though mandatory sentencing seems to have more evils than can possibly be discussed in the time available, we won't oppose it. We won't oppose it. Now, it is interesting. The member for Armidale earlier said that they're actually going to be voting for it. That's not what the position has been from those members opposite. They said, oh, we're not going to oppose it. And why? Because to do so, to stand up for what they believe, in their own assessment, anyone that reads the speech given by the member for Butler, in his own assessment was, well, we think it'll cost us precious votes. We know that this is what the community wants. We know that this is what society wants. And so we don't want to lose votes. And they are hypocritical enough to accuse us of apparently being shallow and trying to put a political wedge. No. We actually genuinely believe in this legislation that we're putting to the House. The real hypocrites here are the members opposite. One after another they stand up and pepper this place with everything that's wrong with mandatory sentencing. It's horrible, it'll cost too much, it won't work, it's terrible. The poor criminals cries out the Labor Party. What do you mean they have to do their time?
Point of order, member for Westwell.
Leading the House and not to impugn the reputation of members on this side.
In accordance with...
Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. What we have here is a Labor Party that wants to have it both ways. Admit it, you want to have it both ways. What do you want, Mr. Member for Bassendean? What the members opposite want is they want plenty of Hansard excerpts for their newsletters and plenty of little quotes saying, oh, we stood up to it and it's terrible, just to keep the bleeding hearts and their electorates happy. But on the same token, to save their political hide, they go, we can't vote against it because it's actually what the community wants. It's what the community wants. So if we oppose it, even though every bit of fibre in us, every bit of our DNA says we don't agree with this, they're not going to oppose it. This is a sham of an opposition. But before I conclude, I also want to draw the members' attention to some of the flawed and diversionary logic and tactics displayed by the opposition's lead speaker on this matter, the member for Butler. Referring to one of the case examples provided by the Minister for Police in her second reading speech, and it was a case example of a 78-year-old lady who was brutally and repeatedly raped in a home invasion. And I think a number of speakers have agreed that it would do injustice even to the case to go into too much detail yet again of what that poor old lady was subjected to. But needless to say that the investigating detective for that case ranked it as one of the top 1% of sexual offences. The top 1%. What this poor old lady had to go through. The offender received a sentence of 11 years in prison. And yet the member for Butler tried to reason as follows. The member for Butler said the judiciary could not possibly have handed out a 15-year sentence because they were forced, by legislation passed in this House, to offer a 25% sentencing discount for plea of guilty. The member took us on a mathematical journey where he reverse calculated the 11-year sentence to account for the 25% discount, arriving back at 14 years and 8 months as the headline sentence. The member used that result as some form of justification for the judiciary, stating, look, they did hand out 15 years, but they were forced to reduce it to 11. The fact that the end result was 11 years and not 15 years is not their fault. And I just thought, well, I just don't get that. I'll tell you what, member for Butler, I may not be a mathematical genius, but let me take you down a journey of my own. You claim that the judiciary was unable to end up on a 15-year sentence due to the 25% guilty plea discount. Well, guess what? The offence carried a 20-year maximum sentence. That's the maximum. And remember that this case was considered not by the media, not by us, but by the police themselves as ranking as the top 1% of worst sexual crimes that they've seen. So you know what? The judiciary actually could have started at 20 years. And they could have applied a 25% discount for guilty plea, and guess where that would have left us? On 15 years. Because if you're in the top 1% of sexual offenders and you don't end up going anywhere near the 20-year maximum, what do you have to do? What do you have to do to end up near the maximum? So what we had from the member for Butler was a vain attempt to defend the judiciary using flawed logic. But you know what? The real kicker is this. This is a real kicker. If you want to come into this house and disagree with our policies, you know what? That's fine. In fact, that's your right. Come in here, disagree with our policies, argue your case. Got no issue with that. If you want to use flawed logic to try and shield your ignorance, that's fine too. We'll just call you out on it, like I've just done. If you want to play political games by completely disagreeing with a piece of legislation, but let it pass to save your political hide, fine, that's your prerogative. But heck, even if you want to declare your lack of confidence in our minister, even though you will be in the minority, but if you don't think the minister's doing a good job, that's so. You don't need to think that the minister's doing a good job. We think the minister's doing a good job, but then so be it. That's okay. No one is asking for your endorsement of our minister. However, it is the sexist and misogynist manner in which the member for Butler has gone about this that is truly disgusting. In debating this legislation and in response to the Premier's statement last week, and members opposite, listen carefully to this. Before you decide to defend the member for Butler, listen carefully to this. This is how the member of Butler referred to the police minister. From Hansa, we are settled with a no-hoper police minister. Her best quality is smiling and batting her eyelashes at the press gallery. Oh, no, here he is. Hang on. Then apparently she's ditzy, she can't plead pig ignorance, she's a vacuum, she knows how to smile for the cameras, and she is an airhead. Well, I'm actually glad that you guys are defending those statements because, quite frankly, the members on this side of the House, we think it's disgusting. We think it's a sexist filth of an attack on the Minister for Police. The irony is, every time our Premier even has an interjection or a grievance or says something that he doesn't agree with in relation to a female member of Parliament on this side of the House, the yell and the scream and the shock is phenomenal. How dare he attack a female member of the opposition? But for the member of Butler, to go troppo in a just disgusting and sexist manner, that's okay. And we know that for a big part of the debate, when these statements were being made, we had the Leader of the Opposition sitting right there, right in front of the member for Butler. And last week, we listened to the Leader of the Opposition try to lecture this side of the House on how apparently he was leading a team with standards. How could we talk about standards? They've got high standards. Well, the Leader of the Opposition has an opportunity here. Show us your standards. Will the Leader of the Opposition endorse the views of the member for Butler? Will the Leader of the Opposition ask the member of Butler to apologise? Let's see what the standards of the Labor Party are actually like. These sexist attacks are a disgrace, and they're designed to take... Thank you, Mr. Acting Speaker. I will conclude on this. These sexist attacks, apart from just being a disgrace, they're designed to take the focus off Labor's flawed arguments and posturing. It is almost uncomfortable watching you guys dance around this issue. You hate mandatory sentencing with every bit of DNA in your body. But to save your political skin, it's you lot that are doing political posturing, not us. We actually believe in what we're doing. You don't believe in what we're doing, but you're going to support it. Who are the hypocrites here? You have compromised all credibility in this debate, and I don't care how many more members after me stand up and talk about the same dribble, this is terrible, but we're not going to oppose it. You've lost this argument, your credibility is gone, your standards are in the dumps, and it'll be interesting to see whether the Leader of the Opposition is willing to come out and endorse the statements of the member for Butler and how he decides to conduct himself in this House against the Minister for Police. Thank you.